Hello everyone, welcome back to my assignment video. This module, you have a quiz on reliability and validity. The hard copy is available in course materials as usual, and again you will have two chances to take it. Of course, there's also a quiz discussion board, which some of you may want to investigate. You should continue reading in Popham, Chapter 6, and Chapuis, Stiggins, Chapuis, and Arter, 2012. There are two chapters I've posted in the assignments, but Chapter 4 you really just need to skim it. There's not a lot in there that is going to help you with the selective response test that is coming up. But Chapter 5, you should read all of that. Both are about creating tests. Chapter 4 is about creating a lot of different kinds of tests. The latter is specifically selective response tests. This module will begin our performance task by becoming familiar with the EdTPA. There are two of them, Elementary Literacy and Early Education Assessment Handbooks, Scale, 2018. Note the way I cited and referenced the EdTPA. There is a discussion board this week on posting your 4 or 5 learning targets. I would stick with 4 so you don't get too complicated, which you will use to create questions for your selective response test on the EdTPA, Elementary Literacy, or Early Childhood Assessment Handbooks. I've divided you into 4 groups, 2 elementary literacy and 2 early childhood, based on the information you emailed me in your response to my welcome memo way back in the beginning of the semester. Of course, some of you didn't respond to that, so I have no idea what section you're in. So I placed you in a section, either one of these 2 sections. So people in the 7 through 12 group, I placed you in the elementary. There were other people that were either in TESOL or special ed extensions. So I placed you wherever. I tried to even out the groups. You'll notice that they are pretty even, depending on what section you're in. It may not be in your area, but you will gain something from the test creation process, no matter which EdTPA you do. You will create 4 to 5 learning targets. As I mentioned, I would stick with 4, which are specific and measurable, and post them in your group in the learning target discussion board. You don't have to upload any initial post anywhere this time. I just want your learning targets cut and pasted in the discussion board. You will need also to create a testing blueprint to go with those targets, an exemplar of which is in the discussion board instructions, and which is explained in Chapuis et al. On page 126. So it doesn't have to be as complicated as the exemplar. I use that one to show how specific you can get with your testing blueprint. It doesn't have to be that specific. Just listing your targets and your questions, and whether they're reasoning or knowledge type questions, and how many of those are. So you should give supportive feedback to your group. Don't just say, I love your learning targets. That is not feedback. You know, if you like them, tell what you do like about them. I like them because your action verbs, you have action verbs that really make them specific and measurable. So make sure you give good feedback. This will be graded using a modified discussion board feedback or discussion board rubric, which you can see by clicking on the 3 dots that are in the upper right hand corner of the discussion board instructions. You can do that for any of the discussion boards. The rubric is there if you click on those 3 dots. You need to post on 3 different days and at least 6 times for distinguished credit, and that's an A, or 10 times on 4 different days to get the advanced credit, which is an A+. So, but you don't have to. I mean, this is a 1 week, a 1 module discussion board, and I will begin grading it on Monday. However, I'm not going to close it until the following Monday, and if you post after that, I'll get notices in my email. Every so often I get a notice saying so-and-so posted late, and I will go back and regrade it. So I would suggest you all get it done by next Sunday. Because this is an assessment course, I would recommend looking at task 1, the planning for assessment, and task 3, assessing learning, and the 5 rubrics that make up those 2 sections. Rubric 5, rubric 11, rubric 12, rubric 13, rubric 14, and rubric 15. Those are all assessment rubrics. Now, this is just a suggestion, but this is an assessment course. So I would say, wouldn't you want to get the assessment part of the EdTPAs, either of the EdTPAs? The only different is rubric 14 in the literacy, elementary literacy EdTPA. It's analyzing students' language use and literacy learning. And in the early childhood, it's analyzing children's vocabulary development. Otherwise, all those rubrics are the same. At least they're titled the same. Again, it's a suggestion. It's not mandatory. You can create whatever learning targets you want. You can make it simple, or you can make it so your classmates will have to dig deep into the EdTPA. This is an open book test, so your classmates will be able to look at the EdTPA to answer your questions. So I would make them challenging. I mean, when you create a select response test, you do your easier questions first, so students gain confidence, and then as you go through, you make your questions more challenging. And your reasoning questions should be your most challenging questions. Also, your fill in the blanks are challenging because you don't have anything to choose from. So some people struggle with those. What I find most important is the difference between a score of 2 and 3, which is passing, a 3 is passing, and the difference between a 3 and a 4, which you need 4s to offset any 2s you might get. I believe that technical aspects of the EdTPA, such as what are the 3 tasks, how many videos do you need, how long should they be, what permissions do you need to get, those are really not big ideas. I mean, some of you will have your questions on those, and that's fine. But that won't help your classmates because you'll have to know these just to submit your work. So it's the subtle differences between the rubric levels that seem to be the stumbling blocks for candidates who did not pass. The most difficult task for my students in previous semesters had been creating the 4 or 5 learning targets on which to base their questions. They struggle with this. They say things like, so-and-so will understand. Candidates will understand. Well, understand is not a specific and measurable verb. I've given you verbs, exemplar verbs, and to use for creating your targets that are action verbs. There are 3 documents embedded in the assignment instructions that will help you write good learning targets / objectives. I have placed a video in the module to show you how to create the select response test along with an exemplar that I talk about. In the video, I suggest that you create 3 learning targets for the assessment task and a 4th for EdTPA vocabulary. And you'll notice all the exemplars have 1 target that's EdTPA vocabulary because that lends itself well to matching your vocabulary words on this side, definitions on this side. I also found that students have an aversion to creating reasoning targets, and we've talked about this in the last discussion board with the Wiggins article, which many of you responded to. So I've given you some resources on creating reasoning targets. Chapui et al., page 139 and page 96. So those 2 pages will help you develop reasoning questions. Wiggins, 2010, that article has several different types of reasoning questions. And Brookhart, which is a article I placed in, I think it's ancillary materials for the next section, I'm not sure. Also, be sure to use the verbs for a learning target that I provided in course materials. Here is a sample question that one of my students made, a reasoning question. To receive a level 4 on rubric 12, providing feedback to guide further learning, which of the following would make more sense? And then there are these 4 choices. After Tommy writes his essay incorrectly, you tell him how to write the essay correctly. After you assess Tommy's work, you give it back to him with his errors highlighted to fix on his own. After assessing Tommy's essay, you let him know how he could have improved his comprehension by annotating in the margins. You give Tommy feedback that helps him fix his mistakes, but you do not point out his strengths. So you would have to use the rubric to figure out, okay, which one of those is a 4? So that's a reasoning question, because you can't just go look up the answer. You can see that the answer can't be gleaned from searching for the correct answer in the EdTPA handbook. Instead, you must make an inference based on your understandings of the nuances of the rubric. There are other sample reasoning questions in the exemplars in Module 7, and there's 3 of them. As you begin to create your initial select response test, be aware of the select response test rubric, which outlines the requirements. You will have a chance to revise your test before submitting it to me for grading. So take advantage of the feedback. I'm going to give you feedback on your first version. I won't be giving you feedback on the second version, but your classmates will. You also make sure you watch my test creation video that's in, I believe it's in this module's presentation. It's a must. And finally, you have to keep notes on the process. There's a template, TPA, it says TPAS, that's a 3-part analytic summary. Take notes on that, because you're going to have to fill that out when you're done with the whole process. You're going to have to reflect on your results. You're going to have to reflect on the test creation process, and you're going to have to reflect on what you learned in the EdTPA. So there's plenty to read in this module, along with Chapui et al., Skim Chapter 4, read Chapter 5, and read Popham 2017, Chapter 6. There are all kinds of materials and course materials, and some formative assessment ideas and ancillary materials. So that's it for this week. Spring starts, when is the 21st? It starts on Thursday, when life up here is renewed, even though it still feels like winter. Although we had weather in the 60s on the weekend, on Friday. So I'll be closing my bird feeders soon.